Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked his equipment one more time. The heat on Kepler 44b was getting worse each day, and the mining colony felt like it was sitting on top of a giant oven. He had been stationed on this planet for 8 months now, and something was definitely wrong. "Ready to move out, sir?" said Corporal Lisa Bennett, adjusting her pack. She was tough as nails and never complained, even when the ground shook so hard it knocked grown men off their feet. Private Ryan Cross nodded and shouldered his rifle. The kid was new to the colony, fresh from Earth, and still jumpy about every little tremor. "These earthquakes are getting crazy. My bunk feels like it's dancing every night." Jake looked at the datapad in his hands. The seismic readings showed activity levels that made no sense. Normal planets did not shake this much without a good reason. Volcanic activity was ruled out weeks ago. Tectonic plate movement was minimal according to all their surveys. Yet the ground kept moving like something huge was stirring underneath. "Command wants us to check Sector 7 again," Jake said. "The mining crew reported some weird stuff yesterday before they pulled out." The three of them walked across the dusty compound toward their transport vehicle. Other Marines waved as they passed, but Jake could see the worry in their faces. Everyone felt it. The planet was acting strange, and strange meant dangerous in their line of work. The transport rumbled to life, and Jake drove them out toward the mining site. The landscape of Kepler 442b looked almost Earth-like in many places. Rolling hills covered with hardy grass, scattered trees that the terraforming crews had planted decades ago, and a sky that was only slightly more orange than blue. It should have been peaceful. Instead, the ground cracked in long lines that seemed to follow no pattern. Some of the cracks were deep enough to swallow a person. Others just appeared overnight and disappeared by morning. The mining crews were spooked, and spooked miners meant production problems. "Sir, look at that," Lisa said. Pointing ahead, the mining site looked like a war zone. Heavy equipment sat abandoned, some of it tipped over on its side. The main drilling platform was twisted at an odd angle, as if something had tried to push it away.
Oh.
Deep gouges in the earth ran in all directions. Jake parked the transport, and the three of them got out. The silence was complete, except for the wind. No insects, no birds, nothing. Even the air felt thick and wrong. "The crew said they hit something hard about 200 feet down," Jake said, reading from his notes. "Harder than rock?" The drill bits kept breaking. Ryan kicked at a piece of broken metal. "Maybe they hit some kind of deposit." "Maybe," Jake said, but he did not believe it. Deposits did not make the ground shake for miles around. They walked to the main drill site. The hole went straight down into darkness. Jake dropped a light stick into it and watched it fall. The stick hit bottom after what seemed like forever, casting a green glow on walls that looked too smooth to be natural. "That does not look like rock," Lisa said. Jake had to agree. The walls of the hole were dark and smooth, almost like metal. But metal did not exist in perfect sheets 200 feet underground. Not unless someone had put it there. The ground under their feet vibrated. Just a small tremor, but it made all of them step back from the hole. "We should take some readings and get back," Ryan said. His voice had a nervous edge. Jake nodded and pulled out the scanner. The device immediately started beeping in patterns he had never heard before. Energy readings, magnetic fields, even some kind of electrical activity. All of it coming from deep underground. "This is not normal," he said. The vibration came again, stronger this time. Then again, like a heartbeat. Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. "Sir, we need to leave. Now." The ground exploded upward. Jake felt himself flying through the air, his body spinning. Out of control, he hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up looking for his team. Lisa was already on her feet, bleeding from a cut on her forehead. Ryan was flat on his back, not moving. The hole was gone. In its place was a crater 50 feet across, filled with that same dark, smooth material. But now it was glowing with a soft blue light that pulsed like a living thing. "Ryan," Jake shouted, running to the kid. Ryan was breathing but unconscious. No broken bones that Jake could see, just knocked out cold. "We have to get him out of here," Lisa said. She was looking at the crater with wide eyes. That thing is still moving? She was right. The dark material was shifting, flowing like liquid but keeping its solid shape. Patterns moved across its surface, too complex to follow, but somehow familiar. Like writing in a language he had never seen but somehow understood, Jake felt heat spreading through his chest. Not the normal heat from the planet's climate, but something internal. Something that started in his lungs and spread outward to his arms and legs. His vision became sharper. The colors looked brighter. He could hear Lisa's heartbeat from 10 feet away. "Sir?" Lisa said. "Sir, are you okay?" At his hands, they looked normal, but they felt different, stronger, like he could tear steel with his bare fingers if he wanted to. The feeling passed as quickly as it had come, leaving him dizzy and confused. "I'm fine," he lied. "Help me get Ryan to the transport." Loaded the unconscious Marine into the vehicle and drove back to the colony as fast as the transport could manage. Jake kept looking in the mirror at the crater behind them. The blue glow was getting brighter. The patterns on the surface were moving faster. Something was waking up under Kepler 44b. Something big. Somehow Jake was connected to it. The heat in his chest pulsed once more, matching the rhythm. Of the light from the crater, he did not tell Lisa about that part. Dr. Amy Carter looked at the blood test results for the third time. The numbers made no sense. Jake Morrison's blood cells were changing at a rate that should have killed him within hours. Instead, he sat on the medical table looking healthier than most people half his age. "Tell me again about the heat you felt," she said, checking his pulse. It was slower than normal, but stronger. Much stronger. Jake shifted uncomfortably. "It started when we were at the crater. Like someone lit a fire in my chest. Then everything looked different. Sharper. I could hear things I should not have been able to hear." "Any pain?" "No. It felt good. Too good. That's what worries me." Amy nodded and made notes on her tablet. She had been the chief medical officer on Kepler 4 for 2b for 3 years, and she had never seen anything like this. Jake's cellular structure was rebuilding itself. New proteins, new chemical compounds, even new types of cells that did not exist in any medical textbook. "I want to keep you here for observation," she said. "For how long? Until I figure out what's happening to you? Or until you sprout wings and fly away?" Jake almost smiled at that. Almost. Across the colony, Dr. Nathan Pierce was having his own problems with impossible data. The samples from the crater defied every test he ran. The material was organic but not alive, metallic but not metal, conducted electricity but also blocked it. It's most disturbing of all. It seemed to respond to his presence. When he was alone, in the lab, the samples glowed brighter. When other people entered, the glow dimmed. It was as if the material could sense human thoughts and emotions. Nathan had been studying alien life forms for 15 years. He had seen bacteria that could survive in pure acid, plants that grew in absolute zero temperatures, and animals that breathed methane instead of oxygen. But he had never encountered anything that seemed to be aware of him while he studied it. He carefully prepared another sample for analysis. The moment his instruments touched the material, his computer screens filled with data, not random information, but organized patterns, mathematical sequences, star charts, chemical formulas. "Impossible," he whispered. The material was not just responding to him. It was trying to communicate. Nathan worked through the night, translating the patterns into something he could understand. What he found made him call an emergency meeting with Colonel Frank Weber and the other department heads. "Right. The planet is alive," Nathan announced to the shocked room. "It's not supporting life, not containing life. The planet itself is a living organism." Colonel Weber, a career military man who had seen combat on 6 different worlds, just stared at him. "It's not possible. The evidence is clear. Kepler 442b is not a planet in the traditional sense. It's more like a massive biological entity that has been dormant for an extremely long period. Our mining operations wounded it. Now it's waking up." Dr. Carter spoke up from her seat near the back. "That would explain what's happening to Jake. His bloodwork shows signs of symbiotic integration with an unknown organism. Symbiotic integration? Weber asked. His body is merging with something else at the cellular level. But instead of killing him, it's making him stronger, faster, more resilient. Nathan pulled up a holographic display showing the planet's structure. Based on my analysis, Kepler 442b was once part of a network, multiple living worlds connected across vast distances. Something destroyed that network. This planet went into a kind of hibernation to survive. Survived what? Weber demanded. But whatever it was bad enough to make an entire planet play dead for millions of years. Meanwhile, Jake was discovering that his changes were accelerating. During a routine fitness test, he ran 5 miles in under 20 minutes without breathing hard. His reflexes were so fast that he caught a falling wrench before the person who dropped it even realized they had let go. Most disturbing were the dreams. Every night, Jake saw visions of space battles fought between living ships and mechanical monstrosities. Entire star systems consumed by creatures that ate planets like fruit. Worlds fleeing through hyperspace, carrying the last survivors of extinct civilizations. In the dreams, he was not Jake Morrison. He was something larger, older, and infinitely more dangerous. He could feel the weight of continents shifting beneath his consciousness. He could taste the chemical composition of the atmosphere. He could sense every living thing on the planet's surface, like individual cells in his body. When he woke, the sensations lingered for hours. Lisa Bennett visited him in the medical bay every day. She brought news from the outside and tried to keep his spirits up. But Jake could see the fear in her eyes. He was changing into something that scared even his closest friends. "The tremors are getting worse," she told him during one visit. "Engineering thinks the whole colony might need to evacuate." "What does command say?" "Weber wants to stick it out. He thinks if we can understand what's happening, we might be able to control it." Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. Control it, Lisa? You can't control something that's the size of a planet. Maybe not. But Nathan thinks the planet is trying to communicate. If he's right, maybe we can negotiate. That night, Jake's dreams were different. Instead of ancient battles, he saw the planet's history. Wow. He watched it form from cosmic dust billions of years ago. He saw life evolve on its surface, not randomly, but guided by the planet's own intelligence. He witnessed the arrival of the first spacefaring civilizations. Welcomed and protected by the living world, then came the Dever. Jake woke screaming. The images were burned into his memory. Massive biomechanical entities that moved between stars like locusts. They consumed everything organic, leaving behind empty shells of dead rock. They had found the network of living worlds and begun systematically destroying them. Kepler-44b watched its brother worlds die one by one. When its turn came, it chose to fake its own death rather than fight and lose. It went dormant, hoping the devourers would pass it by. The plan had worked for millions of years. Until humans arrived and started digging, Jake sat up in his bed, his heart racing. He could feel the planet's consciousness pressing against his mind, trying to merge with his thoughts. It was desperate, terrified, and angry. The devourers were still out there, and the planet's awakening would draw them like sharks to blood. But this time, the planet would not face them alone. It had found something it had never had before. It had found humans. And humans, Jake was beginning to understand, were very good at fighting monsters. Jake broke the steel bar with his bare hands. The metal twisted like soft clay under his grip, and the sound echoed through the training room like a gunshot. Sergeant Katie Holmes, who had been spotting him during the exercise, stepped back with wide eyes. "Jake, that bar was rated for 3,000 pounds of pressure," she said. Jake looked down at the twisted metal in his hands. He had not even been trying. The strength just happened, like breathing or blinking. 3 weeks had passed since the incident at the crater, and his body was becoming something he did not recognize. "I think we should call it a day," Katie said. Trying to keep her voice steady, Jake nodded and set the broken bar on the equipment rack. As he turned to leave, his foot caught the edge of a weight plate. He stumbled, reached out to catch himself, and grabbed Katie's arm to keep from falling. The sound Katie made was not quite a scream. It's more like the noise someone makes when all the air leaves their lungs at once. Jake let go immediately, but it was too late. Katie's arm hung at an unnatural angle, and her face had gone white with shock. "Oh God, Katie, I'm sorry," Jake said, reaching for her again. "Don't touch me," she shouted, backing away. "Don't come near me." Dr. Carter arrived within minutes, followed by 2 medical technicians with a stretcher. Katie's arm was broken in 3 places. The bones had been crushed as if Jake had squeezed them in a vice. "I barely touched her," Jake told Amy later in the medical bay. "I was just trying not to fall." Amy finished reviewing Katie's x-rays and turned to face him. "Jake, you fractured her humerus radius and ulna. The pressure required to do that would be equivalent to getting her arm caught in heavy machinery. I didn't mean to hurt her." "I know you didn't. But that's exactly the problem. You don't know your own strength anymore. And it's getting worse." Amy was right. Jake's transformation was accelerating. His reflexes were so fast that normal conversation felt sluggish. He could hear people talking in rooms 3 floors away. His vision had become so sharp that he could read text on computer screens from across a crowded room. But the physical changes were nothing compared to what was happening in his mind. The planet's consciousness was growing stronger inside his thoughts. Sometimes he would lose track of which memories were his own and which belonged to the ancient entity living beneath their feet. Dr. Carter had identified 12 other colonists who were showing similar symptoms. All of them had worked directly with core samples from the drilling sites. Miners, geologists, and technicians who had handled the strange material were developing enhanced strength and reflexes. But none of them were changing as quickly or as dramatically as Jake. "The planet is creating antibodies," Nathan explained during the daily briefing. "Human antibodies. It's rewriting our genetic code to turn us into biological weapons." Colonel Weber studied the data with growing alarm. "Weapons against what? The Devourers? Based on the information I've extracted from the core samples, they're still out there. The planet's awakening will eventually draw their attention." "How long do we have?" Nathan hesitated. "The energy signatures from our drilling operations have been broadcasting into space for months. If the Devourers detect it and respond, they could be here within weeks." Weber stood up from his chair and walked to the window. Outside, the colony looked peaceful in the orange afternoon light. Children played in the recreation areas while their parents worked in the gardens and workshops. None of them knew they were living on top of a weapon that was preparing for war. "We need to evacuate," Weber said finally. "Sir, the transport ships can't carry everyone," his aide replied. "Yeah, we have 8,000 colonists and only enough evacuation capacity for half that number." "Then we start with the non-essential personnel. Families with children get priority." Jake felt the planet's reaction to Weber's words, a pulse of fear and anger that made his vision blur. The entity did not want the humans to leave. It needed them. More specifically, it needed Jake and the others who were changing. That night, Jake's connection to the planetary consciousness became complete. He could feel every root system, every underground river, every seismic fault line, the planets. Thoughts merged with his own until he could no longer tell where Jake Morrison ended and the ancient entity began. He saw the truth of what was coming. The Devourers were not just destroyers, they were farmers. They cultivated entire galaxies, allowing civilizations to grow and develop until they reached peak biomass. Then they harvested everything, leaving behind sterile rocks floating in empty space. Earth was in their catalog. So were 1,000 other worlds with thriving human colonies. The Devourers had been watching humanity spread across the stars, waiting for the right moment to begin the harvest. Kepler 4-4 to be had hidden from them for millions of years. But now its cover was blown. The planet had a choice: fight and probably die, or watch the Devourers consume every human world in the galaxy. Jake understood his role now. He was not becoming a monster. He was becoming a general. The planet needed someone who could think like a human, but fight like a force of nature. Someone who could coordinate its defenses and lead its newly created army. The other transformed colonists were his lieutenants. Each one was developing different abilities based on their original skills and the planet's needs. The miners could tunnel through solid rock with their bare hands. The engineers could interface directly with electronic systems. The pilots could sense gravitational fields and navigate by instinct alone. But the transformation came with a price. Jake could feel his humanity slipping away like sand through his fingers. The thoughts and memories that made him Jake Morrison were being overwhelmed by the vast intelligence of the planetary entity. He tried to hold on to important things: his childhood on Earth, his training as a Marine, the faces of his friends and family. But they felt distant now, like stories someone had told him about another person's life. By dawn, long-range sensors detected the first Devourer scout ships at the edge of the system. They were still days away, but their arrival confirmed Nathan's worst fears. The ancient enemy had found them. Jake stood at the window of his quarters, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. It might be the last peaceful moment any of them would see. Soon, he would have to become something that could save them all, even if it meant losing everything that made him human. The first Devourer ship looked like a massive spider made of flesh and metal. It was the size of a city, with dozens of legs that moved through space like oars through water. Jake watched it through the colony's main telescope, and the sight made his transformed blood run cold. "Preliminary scans show it's alive," Nathan reported to the Emergency Council. Biological components integrated with advanced technology. It's not just a ship, it's a creature. Colonel Weber studied the tactical display. "How long until it reaches?" "Us. 6 hours," came the reply from the communications officer. "And we're detecting more ships behind it. Lots more." Jake felt the planet's fear pulse through his nervous system. The entity that had hidden for millions of years was about to face the enemy that had destroyed its entire civilization. But this time, it would not face them alone. "I need to get to the surface," Jake said. His voice sounded different now, deeper and more resonant. "The planet needs to prepare its defenses." Captain Helen Ward, who had taken over military operations from Weber, looked at him with barely concealed fear. "Jake, you're not going anywhere. You're too dangerous to be around civilians." "The civilians are already dead if I don't do this," Jake replied. "The Devourers don't take prisoners. They consume everything organic and leave the bones to bleach in space." The transformation was complete now. Jake could feel every heartbeat. In the colony, every blade of grass growing in the gardens, every microorganism in the soil. He was no longer just connected to the planet, he was part of it. The other transformed colonists were gathering at the colony's edges, drawn by the same instinct that called to Jake. 12 people who had been human a month ago now stood ready to become weapons of mass destruction. Lisa Bennett was among them. The change had hit her 3 days ago, triggered by exposure to Jake's transformed blood when she helped treat his injuries. Now she could run faster than a ground transport and punch through solid concrete. "Jake," she said when she saw him, "I can feel it too. The planet is scared." "It should be scared," Jake replied. "The Devourers have been doing this for millions of years. They've perfected the art of consuming worlds." But even as he spoke, Jake felt the planet's defenses awakening. Deep beneath the surface, massive structures were powering up. Systems that had been dormant since before humans had evolved were coming back online. The ground began to shake. Not the random tremors they had experienced before, but purposeful movement. Mountains were reshaping themselves. Rivers were changing. Of course, the very atmosphere was thickening, becoming dense enough to interfere with energy weapons. "What's happening?" Weber demanded, watching the seismic readings spike off the charts. "The planet is preparing for war," Jake said simply. The first Devourer ship entered the atmosphere like a falling star. It was even more horrifying up close. Jake could see that its hull was covered with what looked like mouths, each one opening and closing in a feeding motion. The ship was already trying to consume the planet's atmosphere. Jake reached out with his transformed consciousness and touched the planet's neural network. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Power flowed through him like electricity, but it was not painful. It felt like coming home. He raised his hand toward the Devourer ship, and the planet responded. The ground beneath the ship erupted upward, forming a massive spike of stone and metal that pierced the creature's belly. The ship writhed in pain, its feeding mouths opening wide to release a sound like screaming wind. "Impossible," Weber whispered. "How did you do that?"
How?
Jake turned to look at him, and Weber stepped back in alarm. Jake's eyes had changed. They now glowed with the same blue light that had emerged from the crater weeks ago. "I didn't do it," Jake said. "We did it. The planet and I are one now." More Devourer ships were entering the atmosphere. Dozens of them, each one a living nightmare, designed to strip a world bare. But the planet was ready for them. The atmosphere itself became a weapon. Winds strong enough to tear metal formed around the alien ships, buffing them and throwing them off course. Lightning struck with surgical precision, targeting the biological components that controlled their flight systems. Jake felt the battle through every nerve in his body. Each Devourer ship that was damaged sent a pulse of satisfaction through the planetary consciousness. Each one that broke through the defenses caused him physical pain. But the most disturbing part was how good it felt to fight. The human part. If Jake Morrison was horrified by the violence and destruction, the planetary part of him reveled in it.
Oh.
This was what he had been created for. This was his purpose. Lieutenant Dan Rogers, Jake's best friend since basic training, found him standing in the middle of the colony's main square. The ground around Jake was glowing with the same blue light that pulsed through his transformed body. "Jake," Don said carefully, "you need to listen to me. You're scaring people. Civilians are evacuating to the emergency shelters, but they're more afraid of you than the aliens." Jake looked at his friend, trying to focus on the human memories that were rapidly fading. Dan had been his roommate during training. They had shared stories about home, complained about the food, and promised to watch each other's backs. "I remember you," Jake said slowly. "You're from Colorado. You have a sister named Mary who teaches school." "That's right," Dan said, stepping closer. "And you're from Texas? Your mom makes the best apple pie in 3 counties. You joined the Marines because you wanted to see the galaxy." Jake nodded, but the memories felt like they belonged to someone else. The planet's consciousness was so vast, so ancient, that his human experiences seemed insignificant by comparison. "I'm losing myself, Dan," Jake admitted. "The planet needs me to be something more than human, something that can coordinate its defenses and fight the Devourers. But if I become that thing, Jake Morrison won't exist anymore." Dan reached out and grabbed Jake's shoulders. "Then don't become that thing. Stay human. Find another way." "There is no other way," Jake said. "Devourers are too strong. Too many. The only chance this world has is if I stop being human and start being something that can kill them all." Above them, the battle raged in the sky. Devourer ships were falling like burning rain, but more kept coming. The planet's defenses were holding, but they would not hold forever. Jake looked at his friend one last time, memorizing his face before the transformation took away his ability to care about individual humans. "Tell them I tried to stay human," Jake said. "Tell them I'm sorry for what I have to become." The blue light in his eyes flared brighter, and Dan had to look away. When he looked back, Jake was gone. In his place stood something that might have been human once, but was now something far more dangerous. The war for Kepler-44 to be had begun. The main Devourer fleet arrived like a plague of locusts made of flesh and steel. Jake counted over 300 ships, each one larger than the scouts that had come before. At the center of the fleet was something that made his transformed consciousness recoil in horror. The planet killer was a living mountain, floating in space. It was covered with thousands of feeding tubes that could drain an entire world's biosphere within days. Jake had seen this creature in the planet's ancient memories, watched it consume world after world in the old network. Admiral Campbell's fleet is still 2 days out, Major Chris Taylor reported from the command center. "We're on our own until then." Jake no longer needed to be in the command center to hear the reports. His consciousness had spread across the entire planet. He could sense every human heartbeat, every Devourer ship, every blade of grass that grew in the colony gardens. He was the planet now, and the planet was him. The transformed colonists had become his generals. Lisa Bennett commanded the northern defensive grid, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to coordinate attacks across hundreds of miles. Engineer Sophie Miller had interfaced directly with the colony's power systems, turning the entire settlement into a massive weapon platform. But even with their new abilities, Jake knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. The Devourers had been perfecting their harvest techniques for millions of years. They had consumed entire galaxies. The planet killer moved into position above the colony. Its feeding tubes began to extend downward like the tentacles of some cosmic jellyfish. Where they touched the atmosphere, the air itself began to die. Plants withered. Animals fled in panic. The very oxygen was being drained away. Jake felt the planet's pain as if it were his own. The ancient entity had survived for so long by hiding, by playing dead. Now it was forced to fight an enemy that had already killed countless others of its kind. But Jake brought something new to the battle. Human tactics, human stubbornness, human refusal to accept defeat. All defensive positions target the feeding tubes, he commanded through the planetary neural network. His voice reached every transformed colonist simultaneously. Cut them off. From the source, the planet's surface erupted with weapon emplacements that had been hidden for millions of years. Energy cannons rose from beneath the mountains. Missile batteries emerged from underground caverns. The entire world had become a fortress. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. Jake coordinated attacks across continents, using the planet's own geological features as weapons. He triggered earthquakes under Devourer landing sites. He redirected underground rivers to flood their ground positions. He turned the atmosphere itself into a weapon, creating pressure waves that could crush their ships. The Devourers fought back with weapons that defied human understanding. They released swarms of mechanical parasites that tried to burrow into the planet's crust. They launched viral bombs designed to corrupt the planetary consciousness. They deployed creatures that could eat through solid rock like it was soft cheese. Jake felt every attack, every wound inflicted on the planet. His human memories were almost gone now, overwhelmed by the vast alien intelligence he had merged with. But somewhere deep inside, a small part of Jake Morrison still existed. And that part was absolutely furious. The colonists were evacuating to the emergency bunkers, but Jake knew the bunkers would not save them. The Devourers were too thorough. They would dig up every last hiding place and consume every scrap of organic matter. "Swelfie," he called through the neural link. "Can you overload the main power reactor?" "Are you crazy?" came a reply. "That would destroy half the colony. Colony is already lost." But the explosion might take out the planet killer's feeding tubes. Jake felt her hesitation through the link. Sophie had a husband and 2 children in the evacuation bunkers. Destroying the reactor would kill them all. "There has to be another way," she said. But Jake could see the tactical situation with perfect clarity. The Devourers were winning. More ships were arriving every hour. The planet's defenses were being overwhelmed. Without a dramatic action, everyone would die anyway. He made the choice for her. Jake reached out through the planetary network and touched the colony's reactor core. His consciousness flowed into the control systems, bypassing every safety protocol. The reactor began to overload. "Jake, no," Lisa screamed through the neural link. "There are 8,000 people in those bunkers." "There are 8 billion people on Earth," Jake replied. "The Devourers won't stop here. If we don't make a stand, every human world will fall." The explosion was visible from orbit. The entire northern section of the continent was consumed in a ball of white-hot plasma. The planet killer's feeding tubes were severed at their roots, causing the massive creature to writhe in agony. But the victory came at a terrible cost. Jake felt the deaths of every person in the blast zone. Men, women, children, all of them snuffed out in an instant. The weight of their deaths pressed down on what remained of his human conscience. "You're a monster," Lisa said through the link. Her voice was filled with horror and grief. "Yes," Jake replied simply. "I am." The surviving Devourer ships regrouped and launched a final assault. They had lost their planet killer. But they still had enough ships to consume what remained of Kepler 44b. Jake prepared to meet them with everything the planet had left in the distance. He sensed Admiral Campbell's fleet dropping out of hyperspace. Human ships with human crews coming to help defend a world that was no longer entirely human. Jake felt something he had not experienced since his transformation began. Hope not. The cold, calculating hope of the planetary consciousness, but the warm, desperate hope of humanity. The hope that refused to give up even when faced with impossible odds. The final battle was about to begin. And for the first time since becoming a monster, Jake Morrison remembered why he was fighting. Not for the planet, not for the ancient network of living worlds. He was fighting for every human child who deserved to grow up under a safe sky. He was fighting for every family that deserved to stay together. He was fighting for the future of his species, even if it meant becoming something that could never be part of that future himself. Admiral Campbell's fleet arrived just as the final wave of Devourer ships began their death dive toward the planet's surface. Jake felt their presence through the planetary consciousness like a warm hand on a fevered forehead. Human minds, human hearts, human determination to save their people. The space battle was brief, but decisive. The Devourers had expected to face a dead world drained of all defenses. Instead, they found themselves caught between Campbell's warships and a planet that fought back with the fury of a living thing. Jake coordinated the final assault with perfect precision. As Campbell's ships drove the Devourers down toward the atmosphere, the planet's surface weapons opened fire. Energy beams that could slice through mountains cut the alien ships to pieces. The few Devourers that survived the gauntlet crashed into ground that opened up to swallow them whole. When the last enemy ship fell silent, Jake felt something he had not experienced in weeks. Silence. The planetary consciousness was no longer screaming warnings about approaching death. For the first time since his transformation, the ancient entity was at peace. But Jake was not at peace. The cost of victory weighed on him like a physical burden. Thousands of colonists had died in the reactor explosion he had triggered. Their deaths had saved millions of others across the galaxy. But that knowledge did not make the guilt easier to bear. He tried to take human form, the way he had before the final battle. The effort was exhausting and painful, like trying to squeeze an ocean into a bottle. But eventually, he managed to manifest a body that looked approximately like Jake Morrison, Dr. Amy Carter. Found him sitting on a hill overlooking the ruins of the northern colony. His human form flickered occasionally, like a bad hologram, but it was recognizably him. "How do you feel?" she asked, sitting down beside him. Jake considered the question seriously. "I feel like I'm wearing someone else's body. Like I'm pretending to be human when I'm really something else entirely." "What are you exactly?" "I don't know. Part human, part planet, part something older than both." The planetary consciousness is still there, but it's quieter now, content to let me think my own thoughts most of the time. Amy nodded and made notes on her tablet. Even after everything that had happened, she was still a doctor studying an impossible patient. "The other transformed colonists are having similar experiences," she said. "Lisa can take human form for several hours at a time," Sophie has learned, to interface with electronic systems without losing her personality. They're finding a balance, but they're not like me. They didn't become the planet's primary weapon. They didn't kill thousands of people with a single decision." Amy was quiet. For a moment. "Those people were going to die anyway, Jake. The Devourers would have consumed them along with everyone else. Your choice saved the ones who lived." Jake knew she was right, but logic could not ease the weight of guilt. He had become exactly what the situation required. A monster capable of making monstrous choices. The question was whether any part of Jake Morrison still existed inside that monster. Over the following weeks, the survivors worked to rebuild what they could. The southern colonies had survived mostly intact, and refugees from the destroyed areas were being resettled. Admiral Campbell had left a small fleet to guard the system while larger questions were decided. Dr. Nathan Pierce made a discovery that changed everything. The core samples from the original drilling site were still active, still broadcasting information across space, but now they were sending a different kind of signal. "It's a warning," Nathan explained to the assembled leadership. "The planet is using our communication networks to send alerts to other human colonies. It's telling them about the Devourers and how to prepare defenses." Jake felt the planetary consciousness stir with satisfaction. This had been the plan all along, not just to survive the Devourer attack, but to turn Kepler-44 to be into a fortress that could protect other worlds. There's more, Nathan continued. We're receiving responses. Signals from other planets with similar geological anomalies. The network is rebuilding itself, but with human worlds instead of the original alien ones. Lieutenant Colonel Mary Adams, who had taken command of the surviving military forces, studied the star charts that showed the responding signals. How many worlds are we talking about? At least 40 that we've identified so far. All of them human colonies with unusual seismic activity. All of them sending the same kind of signals we're receiving here. Jake understood immediately. The Devourers had not just awakened one sleeping planet. Their galactic harvesting schedule had triggered dormant entities across human space. Worlds that had been hiding for millions of years were waking up, choosing to ally with humanity rather than face extinction alone. But there was a darker implication to the discovery. If 40 planets were responding to the signals, that meant the Devourers were active across a much wider area than anyone had realized. The attack on Kepler-44b had not been an isolated incident. It was the beginning of a galactic harvest. Jake stood up from his position on the hill and walked to the edge of the crater where his transformation had begun. The blue glow was still there, pulsing with the rhythm of a massive heartbeat. But now it seemed less alien, more familiar. It was part of him, just as he was part of it. He reached out through the planetary network, touching the consciousness of distant worlds. Each one was unique, shaped by millions of years of individual evolution, but they all shared one thing in common now. They all had human partners. They all had guardians who had chosen to become something more than human to protect what they loved. The war was far from over. The Devourers would return in greater numbers, bringing weapons and creatures beyond imagination. Other human worlds would face the same choice Kepler-44 to be had faced: fight and risk everything, or hide and watch their neighbors be consumed. Jake knew what his role would be in that war. He would coordinate the planetary network, share tactical information, help other Guardians learn to balance their humanity. With their new responsibilities, he would be both human and monster, protector and destroyer, salvation and damnation, as the sun set over the scarred landscape of Kepler-4 for 2b. Jake sent a message through the quantum communication network. It reached Earth within hours, carrying a warning that would change the course of human history. The enemy is real. The war has begun. Prepare your defenses. And remember, when you see someone fighting like a monster, they might be the only thing standing between you and the dark. The age of human guardians had begun.